Welcome to the Intentional Man Podcast, a podcast that inspires and equips men to lead lives of intentionality and grow to their full potential. I'm your host, Jonathan McGinley, a life coach that helps men just like you create the life that you want and live a story of significance through my coaching and tools on intentionality. Thanks for joining and welcome to the show. When you start out a business, you expect it to be a lot of hard work, which it is, and that's not what you're saying. But I love how you're saying, sometimes we can overplay that where it becomes this massive obstacle and it's hard to even take the next step because you just think, oh, this is so difficult. This is so tough to do. And that's putting unnecessary stress and pressure on your business, on you. And so you're saying you learned how to simplify things. Is that kind of what I'm hearing where and as you took the steps, you realized they weren't quite as scary or massive as they may have seemed at first?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, it's basically just allowing yourself to have, I guess it's optimism, I mean, in a way, but something that I was actually journaling about the other day was I was thinking about how important it is to be positive and have a positive mindset, but sometimes that is just really annoying to hear because you're like, well, what does that mean, right? But
Right.
the best way that I started to break it down in my mind is oftentimes we can't control what's going to happen. So we might have a really positive hope about, oh, this thing's going to work out and it's going to go this way, and I just know it is. And you need that positivity. But if it doesn't go that way, then the flip side mindset needs to be, oh, okay, that's great, because now something else is going to come up that we're going to figure out that's going to be even better than that. And that's a hard thing for me because although I'm like a great optimist, when things go wrong, sometimes I flip to that negative mindset of like, well, it didn't work out how I wanted. So that sucks. Now what do I do? Right.
Right.
But one thing that my business coach would always tell me is, where's the gift? Like, where's the gift in this thing? And I mean, there's so many stories of things I could tell that haven't worked out, but that's like the best way I could describe needing to have that optimism and turning things that could be hard into something that is a positive. And I think I learned a lot about this from my business partner, Jeremiah, because there were certain things that I would get really stressed about, and he would just kind of look at it really unemotionally, and he would sit back very subjectively. And I think you need to do that all the time in your own business. And he would just kind of look at the problem for what it was and think of a solution. And he wouldn't really get too upset about it, whether it was this crazy problem that we were having or whether it was just a simple problem. He would just kind of sit back and be like, oh, okay. Like no emotion. Sometimes it was weird. I'd be like, dude, you okay? Like it was really good though.
Yeah.
Like it was really helpful. And then he would be able to think more clearly because of that. And he didn't have these, negative emotions attached to the outcome that didn't go the way that he had hoped. And
Right.
so I learned a lot from him in that sense.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And even what you said, your business coach said of, what is the gift in this? It's so easy when things don't go your way, or if you come into a hard situation to build it up and get, so caught up and, hey, this isn't what I expected. But to be able to remove yourself from the situation and say, okay, what are our other options here? What is the gift here? What is, I think that's so good because you're flipping your mindset from this is so hard, this is so challenging, this isn't going right, to all of a sudden you're bringing more optimism in. Okay, what are our options here? What is the opportunity? I think that's so crucial because, and you could probably speak to this, you probably ran into those moments almost on a, weekly basis. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, a few stories come to mind of those types of situations. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, that's good. Well, I'd love to kind of dive into what you kind of put in place as your habits or your disciplines. And this can be in business or just kind of in life, in order to grow your business, in order to see this thing through. What were some of the habits on a daily basis that you put into place in order to kind of grow yourself and grow the business?
Um, I think first and was really investing time at the beginning of the day to have like a structured morning routine. And it didn't always go perfectly, but um, for me, that was like reading my Bible and prayer. So that was important, and taking that time with God. And then it was some sort of mindfulness practice. So journaling was really big. I started journaling
Mm,
a lot when I started my business, and you hear it said all the time, but like the most successful or high achieving or people that have done, whether it's in business or charity or whatever, or in pro sports or anything like that, they usually have a really good practice of mindfulness. So for me, that was meditating, doing a breathing exercise, and then journaling, and
mm,
just writing down my thoughts. And that was really big because it allowed me to kind of let things come to the surface that were either stressing me out that I needed to work through or just have a different perspective on, but also just to kind of reset each day. So those habits were huge because I needed to know myself if I was going to continue to grow the business, like you were saying, um, grow myself to the next level, to grow the business to the next level. Um, and I also had to learn how to recharge because even though a lot of our business was online and automated, it's really easy to think about your business even when you're not working, so it's eight
right.
o'clock at night and you're with your friends and you're still thinking about it. And I really had to learn how to have that off switch and be able to be like, okay, like right now I'm with people and I'm recharging from work. And I think
Mm,
learning how to have that recharging time was really helpful, but there was also a lot of guilt associated with that at first because it was
sure.
like, oh, well, I can't be hanging out with my friends because I haven't achieved all these goals that I have, right? And I
Mm,
think that
yeah.
can actually be pretty counterproductive to your goals when you're not recharging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know I've struggled with the same thing at times where it's, you have some free time on the weekend and you feel like I should be doing something right now for my business, or I
Yeah.
should be, it is a hard obstacle sometimes as an entrepreneur. So I love that, it sounded like from your experience, you had to be really intentional in terms of being able to turn that on and off and not feeling guilty. I'm curious, how did you kind of get to the point where you didn't feel guilty to just be hanging out with friends and be in the moment and not worry about the business?
Yeah, it's still a work in progress. I mean, it's a weird thing when you have that thing within you that always says you need to be doing something productive. But I think it was getting more efficient with my time. So like
Mm,
knowing the most important tasks of the business that had to be done and breaking that down daily and making sure that I was doing those and following through on those. And the more I was, even if I wasn't achieving this certain thing, if each day I was working on that stuff and working towards the bigger items and the bigger checklist items that needed to get done within the work, then
hmm
I was able to be like, okay, I know I'm moving towards this, so I can take time to shut off right now. And then also realizing that sometimes, in order to solve certain problems, um, you do need to just step away from something for a bit,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and just how helpful that can actually be. So
Mm,
those two things really helped, but it was always a work in progress, even to this day. But ultimately, like
for sure.
setting aside your time for work, knowing what you need to be working on and working towards, and doing that when you say you're going to do it, and not getting distracted by social media or you know one of the many things that you could. So that
Right.
that
Right.
helps a lot.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really good. So you would have daily goals, and then if you kind of felt like you hit those, then you were able to turn your brain off for the rest of the night and say, "Okay, I did what I wanted to do, and now I can relax."
Yeah, well, also planning out my day the night before was big, so that I knew exactly what I needed to do the next day and what the top three important things were. That was really helpful because it allowed me to be a lot more organized. I still do that to this day, even though I
Yeah, that's really
am
good.
not currently running a business and I'm quote unquote semi-retired. I'm still doing that. Like every night I think, okay, what do I need to get done the next day? What am I working on? What investments am I looking at? And then it allows me to go into the next workday, do those things and be like, okay, you know what? This took longer than I thought. So that's okay because it ended up being really important. And now I just need to be done at like whatever time of the afternoon it is, and then I can just
Mm-hmm.
kind of shut down and relax.
Right. Well, I love that. And that's kind of what this podcast is so much about, is taking the time to be intentional. You're being intentional the night before so that the next day you know exactly what you're doing. I think so oftentimes it's so easy to be reactive in terms of
Mhm.
your workday. If you don't do that, if you don't take the time before the day to plan, you get into your day and maybe you open your inbox and then it's like, okay, now I'm working on this because this came up and now I'm working on this. And all of a sudden you get to the end of the day and you didn't do anything that was, super important that was driving your business forward.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's what you're saying, being intentional the night before of saying, okay, these are my three biggest things. Now, going into the day that, okay, this is what I'm doing. You can sit down, you can do it with confidence, which I think is so huge.
Yeah, no, you're right, man. It's easy to get caught in that trap. Sometimes even when you have your day planned out, it's a constant
For
battle,
sure.
but the more you become aware of it, the more you see your productivity go up and your happiness because you feel like,
Yeah.
I did what I said I was going to do today and I did the most important things. And some days aren't like that. And then you just have to say, you know what? That's okay. I'm going to
Hmm.
remember how annoying that is that I didn't follow through on what I told
Yeah.
myself I was going to do and do it the next day.
Yeah. Which is such a good thought too, because I do a similar thing with kind of a commit to three big things. And I've struggled the times that I don't hit it, where I'm just kind of competitive with myself, where it's like, shoot, I didn't do what I said I was going to do. How do you protect yourself against kind of that negative self-talk or not spiraling down if you didn't exactly stick to what you said you're going to do?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I try to get back into the groove by listening to a book, listening to a
Hmm.
podcast, something that's going to be motivating me again and reminding me of my dreams and goals. And then I just maybe if I fell behind that day, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to work another hour today. Just
Yeah.
focused on what I didn't, that one important task, if I have the time, and I'll do that.
Right.
And then I'm like, after that hour, plan out my next day, feel so much better because then I can go into the next day with some momentum. As our friend Ross
Hmm.
says, that's momentum.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's something like that. Or if I don't have the time and I had, prior engagements that evening, I'm just like, okay, this is what it is. Plan out the next day. And I
Mm,
think planning out that next day, even if I
mm.
had a really unproductive day, just kind of gives me that reassurance of like, okay, I'm going to get back at it tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, that's really
And,
good.
and then oftentimes that next day will be productive because I'm like, I didn't follow through the day before and I don't want to do that again. It's just not a good
Right.
feeling.
Right. Yeah, that's so good. And I think that's a good kind of general rule to live by is, if you have one bad day, it happens, it's okay. But I think if we don't compound those days, you're like, okay, it happened. Forgive yourself, hop right back on the next day, get back onto it instead of, I think that's where it gets dangerous is if you have a bad day that turns into two, that turns into three, it turns into four, and all of a sudden you got a bad week, you know?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so true.
that's really good. That's really good. Well, I'd be curious. So looking back now on this side of things, 6 years, sold the business. What's one thing that you wish you would have known when you first began your career?
Oh man, that's a good question. Um, I think that if you're really committed to the journey and you're starting to see, I mean, honestly, it's going to sound cliche, but I wished that I would have dreamed a little bit bigger.
Mm,
And it's not a regret because I think you grow where you're at and your vision slowly expands once you achieve certain things. And those things can compound until where what started as a really small vision becomes really big. But and I guess I'll share this story. But basically, before I sold my company, I was really stressed, and I was like, at this point in my life where I turned 29, happens to everyone, believe it or not. And I I put a ton of pressure on myself. I don't know why. I always have ever since I was a kid. And
Mm,
so I was like, well, there's so much more that I want to do. My business wasn't quite where I wanted it to be, and I wanted just to achieve more, do more, have more experiences. Like
yeah.
I've always like wanted it all. So I really put that pressure on myself. And I started doing a ton of stuff extra, um, because I was like, I felt like I was behind in life. Right. So I bought a second company, and then I also bought a house with uh, with our friend Ross, who we both know, to renovate because it seemed like a good side hustle investment. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh well, that seems like fun. And then our company started having a lot of issues, and so my main company that was, paying me a good salary, paying the bills, paying all these things, started having issues. And then I had all this extra stuff that I was doing, and I was doing it to get to my goals faster, when what I should have been doing was just focusing exclusively on my company, because that was the real like breadwinner and the real thing that was gonna, you know, help me achieve my dreams.
Right. Right.
So basically what happened was I started getting so overwhelmed, so stressed out because I was doing all this stuff. My business was starting to encounter problems that needed my full attention. So I started feeling really behind. We had a slump in sales because of something that happened. And it wasn't something that we couldn't recover from, but we had to work through it, and it was going to take time. So I felt even more behind. And long story short, it was a really stressful year. And um, I felt further away. And the reason I share this story is because I was doing all this stuff and just way overwhelming myself. And as a result, I felt further away from my goals than I ever had before, because I make a practice of reviewing my goals at least on a weekly basis, if not daily. But
Mm,
also once a year, I get away by myself, and I write down my visions and my goals and what I want to see happen in life in general, not just in
so
business,
good.
but everything. And I felt further away from all those things than I ever had. And I finally realized that, started getting things off my plate. I got rid of the second company that I bought. It was really cool, but I didn't have the time. I shouldn't have bought it. So I
Hmm.
got rid of it, finished the house, finally started fixing some of the things that were going wrong in our company with growth and, competition coming into the market. And then I took 2 weeks off after all that was done. It was at the end of the summer. I took 2 weeks off, and during those 2 weeks, we had started, prior to that, we had started shopping the company around to see if there were potential buyers. But in my mind, I was like, no, like it's not in a good place to sell, but we'll just see what happens. I just wanted to learn more about what was happening at a high level in the industry, and how these bigger companies that were buying companies like ours were valuing us. And
Mm,
in that time frame, we actually ended up getting a really good offer from a company to buy our brand. And all of a sudden, all that stressing that I had done, worrying about not achieving my goals and being further away than I ever had felt like I was before, was suddenly just like achieved, because
mm.
we got the offer, we accepted it. We negotiated. It was more than we thought we could actually sell the company for. And it was actually the goal that we wanted to sell the company for. And suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, like here it is. Like
Wow.
here's all the goals in business that I was working towards. And it was just like a big reminder to me of like, you just don't know what's going to happen. Like you might be further away from your goals than you ever thought you were, but something can just change within a day, within a week, within a month, that turns everything around. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what happened for us. And for me personally, especially, it was such a big like realization of like, you have to maintain that positive outlook on life and that optimistic outlook on what's going to happen, because you might think you're behind, but you actually might be closer than you ever were before. And
Yeah.
and just like remembering that, and what it made me realize was like, wow, we achieved all this. This is what we were working towards. This is what we said we wanted, and here it is. So why didn't I make bigger goals?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
like what it was such a good, powerful moment of like realization of that. It was like, wow, I can do these big things that I said I wanted to do. Um,
Yeah.
but also like taking a step back and being like, what, like, if all things are possible through Christ who strengthens us, what else is possible? You know,
Right.
um, so it was just a really humbling moment in a way too, because it was like, wow, okay, like, thank you, God, for making this happen, because I
Yeah.
didn't see it. I didn't have the vision for it.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful. That's really cool. And I think what I kind of heard you say was, I mean, do you feel like you kind of lost sight of the bigger vision in terms of your company when you started trying all these other little side hustles, and then kind of realized,
Oh
hey,
yeah, I did.
yeah,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
realized that very quickly too. That was a very hard lesson learned, but I just realized like I had lost the bigger vision of what I was doing with my company, and in turn compromised, you know, friendships, not being able to invest time into where I wanted to because I was just so overloaded. It was like a period of 3 months where I was just working all the time. And then in
yeah,
those 3 months, I was like, you know what? I don't care how much money I'm going to lose. I'm going to get rid of this second business,
mm,
finish the projects on the house that were being renovated, and just be done. Like that's,
yeah,
and then I'm only going to focus on my company, because I definitely
yeah,
did lose sight of that.
yeah, yeah. That's powerful. And I mean, it sounded like the other key factor for you was the optimism, the positive mindset, and just kind of like a gratefulness. Like I could just feel that in your voice. Gratefulness to God, but gratefulness to just the outcome and everything that happened. So it sounds like, the three things that I'm pulling from that is, stay locked in on your bigger vision, maintain a positive mindset, and, keep an attitude of thankfulness. Do you feel like with those three things, like, is there a way that you kind of continue to foster those things in your life now after that experience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you nailed it, man. I'm really glad that you got that from that, because I think that is exactly what I was trying to say, is just having that gratitude, and maintaining that thankfulness, and being it's funny because once you achieve your goals, you kind of say, okay, what's next? And uh, something that my business coach had said was, there's no such thing as unrealistic goals, only unrealistic timelines.
Hmm.
And that was so true for me, and it made me realize like, oh, okay, what's next? If there's no such thing as an unrealistic goal, and I really believe this is where God has me in the business world, then how big of a dream and vision do I want to have for what's going to happen next? um, but then also kind of coupling that with like humility of being like, you know what, the next thing that I could start could fail, and that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
I'll look for the gift and be grateful for whatever I learned from that. And I don't need to have my ego attached to everything that I'm doing being this big thing because I had a successful company, right? Um,
Right.
and just kind of going back to that square one of being like, I'm just grateful for what we achieved, because I can fall into the trap even now of being like, well, you know, downplaying what the things that have happened for me in life, downplaying
Right.
those and being like,
Right.
well, it's not that big of a deal compared to this guy, because
Sure.
this guy sold his business for 20 times what I sold mine for, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just being grateful and being like, okay, I'm grateful. Now what's next? Um, that's definitely the place I'm in now.
That's so good. That's so good. And I mean, that comparison game is so tough as an entrepreneur. There's always somebody more successful. There's always somebody whose business is doing more than yours. But being able to come to that place, like, it's so cool to just hear you say that, to see that, and to see you live that out of, you know, being so appreciative for what you have done and having that foundation of thankfulness be what's driving you forward. It's like, just to hear your confidence to say, I could start something and it could fail and I'm okay. I think that fear of failure is such a big barrier for new entrepreneurs, especially.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
but to see, your experience and everything that you've gone through, obviously you've had some failures. That's part of the deal. But to see like, okay, I'm very confident in who I am now. It's just really, it's really inspiring to me to be able to hear you say that, and to live in that place of thankfulness is so crucial to kind of keeping that level headedness.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, man, for sure. I think you nailed it. It's if people didn't fear failure, I think the world would be a different place. I was kind of raised with that mindset, so I was very fortunate in that way. Um, my family definitely went through times where we did not have a lot of money at all. But the one thing that my parents always imparted on me, which I'm more grateful for than anything else they could have given me, was just kind of that mindset that it's okay to one, pursue your dreams, and then for two, to fail. I mean, because that's how
Yeah.
you learn, right? So
Right.
it was like, if you're going to try something, and sometimes that failure can even be something just not working out as great as you thought it was going to, but just
Sure.
being okay with that and knowing that your identity is not in that thing. And the further that you can detach your ego from what you're doing, in a way, like, yeah, obviously you're going to take pride in your work and what you're doing, but the more that you can be like, hey, if this fails, that's okay, because I'm going to learn something from this that's going to help me the next time around.
That's so
Yeah.
good. Yeah. And I heard, I can't remember who it was, but they said, just because you failed does not make you a failure. And I thought that was such a cool like mindset to have
Yeah.
of, yeah, I may fail, but that doesn't make me, my identity, a failure. And that's what you're saying. And I think that's so huge, is to be able to separate, what you do from who you are.
Mm.
Just because you may have made a mistake or things didn't go the way that you wanted, that doesn't make you a failure. It just means that, like, when you fail, it usually means that you're actually trying and you're stretching yourself and you're pursuing something bigger um, than you would if you never did fail. And I think that's been such a huge thing for me to kind of shift my mindset of, because this has always been a problem for me, but it was like, I'm not a failure personally if I make some mistake. It's part of the process of pursuing my dreams. And it
Yeah,
sounds like that's where you've kind of come to.
for sure, man. And I think also that's where community comes into play, because
Mm,
when you have a circle of people around you who just love you for who you are, and you can be open and vulnerable with, then it allows you to shed a lot of the stigma, I think, that we tend to feel, um, like, especially as like men who want to do big things. You
hmm
kind of want to achieve things, and things always work out for you because you're smart, right? Or whatever it is. And
Right.
when you just have a good, solid group of friends who you can just be real and honest with, then it allows you to be okay with those things that don't work out in life. And even if
hmm
it sucks, you can work through that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you bring that up, because I think that is something that can very easily go by the wayside as an entrepreneur. As you're starting your business, you can get so focused on the work that you disregard relationships. Um, but being intentional about having good people around you is so key to your success. And I've heard that throughout your whole story today of, your business partner and your business coach and the other leaders around you, and then having a good set of friends. I mean,
Yeah,
do you think
the
you could have
friends.
done what you did without all that?
No, definitely not, man. I mean, absolutely not. All of that contributes to it. Um, because even just being in your friends that you surround yourself with at least have to support what you're doing, and not be dragging you down in that sense, which I
Right.
was very fortunate to have a lot of friends like that. So, when you're off from work, you can be around people that you can kind of just talk through about things like, hey, this is going on, it's stressing me out, because it
hmm
can't always be a high level business coaching conversation. It can't,
Right.
like, that has its time and place, but sometimes you just need to get it off your chest.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah. So
That's really good. That's really
I
good.
think it's really crucial. And there are people out there who are also going to be successful without having close relationships, but ultimately I think it brings a lot less fulfillment in life. So
For sure. For sure.
it's definitely crucial for fulfillment, and I don't think you can argue that point.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so good, man. So good. Thank you for sharing. Well, I appreciate you being on. So many good insights, so much good wisdom, and just inspiring. I just really feel very uplifted, inspired, just talking to you and hearing more about your journey. Thank you for being somebody that pursues your dreams and gives others permission to do the same, and then wants to join others on that journey too. So thank you so much for your time and just in your relationship, your friendship. I really appreciate it all.
Yeah, hey, thanks, man. I appreciate that for sure, and it's been really good just getting to know you more in the past couple years as well, and just seeing your heart for other people and just the intentionality that you have in your relationships. And I remember you gave a speech one time at the church about your vision for what you wanted to do for men in the church and how you wanted to see them become leaders. And I never forgot that. I think it really spoke a lot to who you are and where your heart's at with just wanting to help people and see them live up to their full potential. So I love that, man. So you're an inspiration to me. So
thanks, man.
Thanks for having me on the
right
podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Intentional Man podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to support the show, please share it with others, post about it on social media, and leave a rating and review. If you are someone who is looking to take your life to the next level, accelerate your success, and live more intentionally, I would love to help. Shoot me a text at 970-430-6085, and we can schedule a time to meet to discuss your vision and your goals. Again, that is 970-430-6085. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, build a life that matters by living intentionally.